found I was losing the minimum, but gaining the maximum. I was getting max value for my hands, and I wasn't overplaying second best hands.
It is vlog 255, and that is the voice of Mike G on the Race to the $5 Big Blind podcast, and that has got to be something that a lot of you could benefit from. Bart Hansen at Crush Live Poker has been saying that for years. It's a race to get from 1-2 into the $5 blind games. And not only will you win more if you can actually win in the game, but you're paying way less in rake in proportion to the actual size of the pots in those games. And now there's a podcast to discuss that very topic with Mike G, who's kind of an East Coast grinder. I kind of like just his overall way about him. Kind of an old school feel to kind of a new school guy. But if you're someone who's been playing 1-2, would love to be able to work your way past it, then that's the podcast for you. Go ahead and check out crushlivepoker.com. You can listen to that, get the regular Crush Live Poker podcast from Bart every week, and their weekly videos, which are great training material, stuff that I've definitely been trying to brush up on even more of late. Go through the link in the description below and get 25% off a basic or premium subscription for life on crushlivepoker.com now, with the Race to the $5 Big Blind podcast. As for me, last week was obviously a smashing success on this vlog on a day where I didn't even win a ton of big pots. And I gotta be honest, I don't hate those days. It really doesn't bother me to just take down a bunch of small pots, let the game come to me, pick my spots against the players I want to be playing hands against, and I'm hoping to duplicate that on this day at Peppermill. The 255th running of this particular vlog would take place at a place where some guys are just literally made of money. Also a place where if you're looking for a quality entertainment option on a Thursday or Friday night, I'd recommend checking out the Terrace Lounge, which I've done on many occasions. And by the way, shout out to the guy on the string bass in that particular band. I normally do vlog on Thursdays, but in this case I was doing so on a Wednesday, with the Nevada Wolfpack basketball team scheduled to play in an NCAA tournament game during my normal shooting time. I'd initially buy in for $1,000 on table 1 on a day that featured double board Hold'em bomb pots, every deal or change. Other than losing about $125 over the course of about 5 of those that I played, they were pretty uneventful for me, though not for others. First hand that I would play would come when I picked up pocket 10s under the gun and make it 35, getting 2 callers. And with 105 in the pot, the board would come out 5, 5, 7, 2 hearts, and I bet another 35. The low jack immediately raises to 75, and it folds back to me, and with my overpair, and this basically just being a min raise, I go ahead and complete. So with 245 in, the turn is an offsuit 3, and I check. He just bets another 75 here. I wasn't sure if this was extreme strength or extreme weakness. Turns out it would be one of the two, but either way, for that price, I'm making the call. And with 545 in, the river is the deuce of hearts, and I check once more. I was certainly hoping he would shut it down on this card, but he doesn't. He makes it 150, so I fold my 10s, and he shows pocket 7s for a flopped full house. That was followed up by me getting 10s again, and raising to 50, getting 2 callers, but both would fold me on this one on a 9-high board. Over the next hour and a half, I wouldn't waste a minute making the best hand, though I did flop 2 more overpairs in spots where they will often be good, but often applied to neither of those hands. So most of my $1,000 buy-in was gone, so I'd add on for a hockey puck, now in for $2,000 on the day. The bomb pots would continue, and I would keep getting dealt hands like Game 5. But since the Golden Knights aren't playing on this day, I'm not contractually obligated to play it. We'd get a limp, and I'd check my option in the hijack with 9-7 offsuit. And with 30 in, the board would come out Jack, 7-5 rainbow, and it would get checked to me. I bet 20 with middle pair into a pot of 30, and the player in MP2 makes the call. So with 90 in, the turn is an offsuit 9, giving me 2 pair. Now he leads out for 20. This is not a regular player, and clearly a guy who hasn't played these stakes a lot, so wanting to keep him in there, I just raised to 50. And, sure enough, I'd accomplished that goal. And with 190 in, the river is a 10. Now he leads out again, this time for 50. I can't raise, and I can't fold. So that leaves but one option, creating a $290 pot, and I get shown pocket eights, proving the old adage that I've talked about many times. If there was a one-liner out there and someone bets, you better be ready to see that fifth card that makes the straight. We get several limps, and I'm on the button with ace-jack offsuit. Now, I am down 1,000 at the moment, and I have a terrible image. So the idea of bloating this pot up with this hand didn't really appeal to me in the moment. Certainly sometimes I'm going to raise there. But I just decided to over-limp. And with 50 in, sometimes limping really is pimping, as I'd get a jack, 9 deuce rainbow board. A vlog viewer named Melissa, who was in town from Marin County, had already beaten me out of 3 small pots on the day here, and would lead out for 30. I'd raise it to 110, and it would fold back to her, and she would complete. And with 260 in, the turn is the 4 of spades, and now she decides to bet out, making it 200. I'm certainly expecting her to 3-bet off her sets and 2 pairs on the flop in this limped pot, so I think ace-jack is doing fairly well in this spot, so I put in those chips. And with 660 in, the river is the 3 of hearts, and she bets another $200. Certainly under those circumstances, I'm not going to be going out here, so I don't waste much time making the call, creating a $1,060 pot, and she shows a pair of jacks with an 8 kicker, so our ace plays, and we take that one down. But don't feel bad for Melissa, as she'd go on to win a $4,000 plus pot with pocket queens against ace-king on this board in a massive cooler, unfortunately, for a local favorite named Dennis.
Can that be on the blog?
You're on the blog. What a beast. What a hand. And that takes us to this hand. I get dealt the best possible hand you can get dealt before the flop in middle position 1 and make it $35. Folds to the cutoff is a guy that I don't know well, but I know that he hadn't 3-bet at all on the day. And here he does exactly that, making it 150. Folds back to me, and I 4-bet him to 360. He thinks about it for only a minute before making the call. And we have 720 in the pot with the flop coming out queen 10-3 rainbow. I just bet 175 here, hoping to keep him in there with hands like pocket jacks or ace queen, even though I didn't think he could have that all that often. He then surprises me by announcing 500. Pretty clear that no matter what I did here, the hand was going to end the same way. But in this case, I make the call, certainly concerned that I'm up against either a set of queens or a set of tens in this spot, although tens even seemed somewhat unlikely to me. I certainly wasn't planning on getting all the chips in on the turn. I was certainly going to be evaluating with what card came out there and what he ultimately would decide to do. With 1,720 in, the card that came out was very interesting. The Queen of Spades, pairing top pair, and I check. He then bets another 500, and he has me covered. I have 1,000 or so behind. This is just so weird. It's not a spot where you can be worried about quads. I'm sorry. If he has it, good for him, but I have to take pocket queens out of the equation here for the most part. I certainly didn't think over the course of what I'd seen over the previous few hours that he'd be in this spot with tens all that often either, re-raising and calling a 4-bet pre-flop in this spot with them. But if he did have them, it felt like a spot where I was just going to have to say, congratulations, if you're fortunate enough to have that hand in this spot. Spoiler alert, he didn't have pocket tens. It really felt to me like pocket kings, and certainly it could be the other 2 aces that it slow played at pre-flop was also a possibility. I guess ace queen's possible, but first of all, I do block that, and second of all, is he really 3-betting and calling a 4-bet with ace queen? It was a spot in which I wish I knew the player better, because in some spots you can simply never underestimate unknown recreational players who have a lot of money. So I gave it some thought, and finally I arrived on the conclusion that he's just not going to have a full house or quads here enough of the time for me to fold pocket aces. And he is going to be overplaying kings a lot of the time here as well. So I obviously can't just call. I got to either put the 1,000 in or go out here, which seems ridiculous to go out at this point. So I do put that money in. And he actually thinks about this for a few seconds. There was a small percentage of my life that was spent on me thinking that aces were definitely good here, but after he calls, creating a $3,900 pot, I would find out that they aren't good. And he would show Queen Jack of Diamonds, a hand that I never even got around to considering, never thought he could possibly take this line with, never thought he could get this lucky with, but somehow did as a result. He would actually fill up on the river. So I don't say this often, but sometimes guys just click buttons in spots like this. It just happens. And this happened to be one of those, and he happened to press the right one, even if it was a bit of an accident. So after buying in for $2,000, I was now down to the felt. This is a mid-session update. That hand sucked. But the casino is still open. So I was a little bit on tilt, obviously. But truth is, I wasn't extremely on tilt, because the game was so good. Normally, after losing $2,000, I would just go home. But in this case, and I don't think I've ever done this on the vlog, I would go to my box, which I have at Peppermill, and take out 3 hockey pucks. And for the first time ever, after buying in once more, I was in a game for $5,000. I knew that I would have to get into a pot relatively quickly with the guy that had just beaten me with the Queen Jack, because every time a guy like that wins a pot that big, they never stay more than a half an hour to an hour afterwards. It just never happens. So I was hoping to get into a pot with him here, and sure enough, I'd get my wish. He would limp to the left of the rock, which was in middle position 1. I have King-Queen offsuit on the button, and an image that will get me called by virtually anything. And didn't feel like just playing a small pot this time. I make it 75. Before it would even get to the guy who limped in, the straddle would cold call the 75, and certainly at that point, the limper wasn't folding anything. And we get a $230 pot with the flop coming out. King, king, 3, 2 clubs giving me trips. And it gets checked over to me. I bet 110 here looking to build this pot up. First player mucks, but Mr. Queen Jack is not going anywhere. And with 450 in, the turn is an offsuit 7. He checks, and once again, I come out and bet it. I make it 200. If he's drawing to a hand, I want to keep letting him do so. And if he's bluff catching with a small pair, I want to let him do that as well. He only thinks for a second and makes the call. So with 850 in, the river is a complete brick. I decided to operate under the assumption that I'd been on, that he just is not going to be all that strong here too often, and I need to make sure that he pays me off in this spot. It would prove to be the wrong thought process, but I can't always show you what I wish I'd done. I can only show you what I did. I bet 325 here. Certainly wish I'd bet more. He does think about this for a bit before paying off, creating a $1,500 pot on the number, and he does end up having the case king. He didn't show the other card. I could kind of see it, and all I could tell was that it wasn't paint. So kind of surprised he chose to raise a 4-bet pot with a pair of queens and a jack kicker, but not raise in a single raised pot with trips, but to each his own. I'd make a few hundred more back from the other guy who had been in the last hand when he clearly had adopted the mindset of, I'm calling Ben with anything because Ben is on massive tilt, and that was actually lucrative to me, the fact that he was doing that, because I'd win several $100s more back from him as a result of getting 2 streets of value with pocket 9s on a board in which there were 2 overcards, so that was also nice. I would then get dealt aces again. I was ready to battle to get my $2,000 back, but I'd have to settle for simply getting $100 of it back. That's not nearly as fun, but it's still better than losing. About an hour after winning that big hand off of me, the Queen Jack of Diamonds guy would indeed book his big win. Over the next 2 hours, the game would gradually fizzle out. There was a reason for that I'm going to mention coming up. We had a couple of older gentlemen that were in the game but don't like playing shorthanded, so they would switch to the 1-2 game instead, leaving only 4 players in the game, and that would be the end of the day for me. It often happens on the days where you actually have some time to play and you get stuck and would like the opportunity to win it back, and you're kind of getting some momentum. That's when the game just breaks on you, as it did here. So I would simply rack up and book the loss. All right, it's not even 4 o'clock yet, and the game has broken. And before I tell you anything else about this session, I have to point out, for management, if they're curious, If you want to know why this game broke today, because that almost never happens on Wednesdays. Usually there's 2 games over the past couple of years. The reason that the game broke today was because of the bomb pots. If you eliminate the bomb pots, you get more longer lasting games. I can assure you of that. Your decision, just something to keep in mind. As for this session, before I even tell you how I did, I'm still obviously blown away by that ace's hand, but what can I do? I can't complain here. I got what I wanted. I wanted to have a guy give me action in that spot without much of a hand, and I achieved that goal. I obviously could not put him on a hand when the queen paired on the turn, unless I really want to put him on the one combination of quads. It's possible that he's got pocket 10s there, but to me, king seems much more likely given the pre-flop action. And it's going to be tough to have ace-queen because I blocked that hand, and I didn't even see him calling that much pre-flop with that. So obviously my read, not exactly accurate on what he could have there, but a truly bizarre and memorable hand that goes against me. But I'm able to win back a lot of the money I lost in that hand afterwards, and only end up booking a relatively small loss. So I will certainly take that, given the way that it looked on my first ever day in for 5,000 here at the Peppermill, and out for about 4.5. All right, once again, the link to 25% off of Crush Live Poker is in the description below. Check out the Race to the $5 Big Blind podcast, the latest podcast up on that particular website. If you think that hand with the pocket aces against the queen jack is kind of a microcosm of the year for me at poker, well, then you and I are thinking along the same lines. I'm recording this 4 days after that hand took place. I ran into that same guy again, and I forget what I said about it, and something along the lines of queen jack, huh? And he's like, "Well, yeah, it's it's my favorite hand." And I'm thinking to myself, well, if I had just known that queen jack was your favorite hand, maybe I could have played this hand entirely different. It's favorite hand. What can you do? 4-bet pot. Queen jack. Okay. All right. So hit those like and subscribe buttons if you want to continue to see what's likely to be more craziness next week. And we'll see you back here then.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey.